19th century. In 1870, the European countries only owned about 10% of Africa, but later on, in 1900, they owned about 90% of Africa. Congo river basin was considered impossible due to the impenetrable forest and the impassable rapids of the river itself, which served as a barrier to the European exploration. Henry Morton Stanley gained the interest and support of the Belgian King Leopold II for his expedition into the Congo basin to prove that the Congo natives were susceptible of civilization and that the Congo basin was rich enough to repay exploration. Okay, so now let us move on to New Zealand. Aotearoa means land of the long white cloud. Means land of the long white cloud. It occurred in 1840, which marks the beginning of British colonialism in New Zealand. In tribal warfare, arrival of arms and diseases brought in by British has caused the declination of Maori population. After the Treaty of Waitangi, British migrants increased in numbers while the Maoris decreased in numbers. The British ignored the Treaty of Waitangi and keep on taking over resources from the land of the Maoris, which has caused the change of the Maoris into Europeans towards monocultural community. Okay, so now I am going to talk about the short story that we have been selected to explore more about colonialism in Africa through the short story entitled An Outpost of Progress by Joseph Conrad. First, let's go to the summary of the short story. The story is about two ordinary white men, Kayets and Kalia, who have been posted to a distant trading station in the heart of Africa. In spite of the fact that they lack of all qualifications for such work, they are withdrawn from their government posts at home and sent to an unknown country with a mission to civilize the wilderness and establish local markets in order to stimulate trade that will be profitable for their home country. Meanwhile, there is a character named Makola. He's a civilized nigger who lives with his family on the outpost, is responsible for the acquisition and storage of ivory, and is in charge of the 10 black men which is working at the post. It gradually dawns on Kayets and Kalia that they have become involved in a terrible crime. But after discarding their initial pangs of guilt and are comforted by the thought of lucrative commissions on the ivory. So one day, the steamer is late, their provisions are running low, and the physical and their mental state of the two white men are rapidly deteriorated. Demoralized by a quarrel over the last lumps of sugar, they begin to fight, and Kayet shoots the unarmed Kalia in what he believes to be self-defense.
Move on to the socio-historical background. For this short story, the socio-historical background that we found is the economy. The Congo Free State, as it was ironically called, was confirmed as the private property of King Leopold II in return for guarantees of neutrality, free trade, and opposition to slavery. Besides that, ivory and rubber are the main sources of income for King Leopold II's company and its agent. While the rubber trade made a fortune for Leopold II, it led to the extreme brutalization of the local population. Under Leopold's ownership, approximately 10 million Congolese died as a consequence of exploitation and disease.
Okay, now let's go to the binary opposition of the short story. As we know, The colonizer for this story is the Western, and the colonized people by the Western is the African. So, the first binary opposition is civilized versus uncivilized. As you can see on page 9, there was a quote, Makola, a civilized nigger, was very neat in his person, which means Makola here is Makola is a colonized person, but he also dressed as a civilized person. As we know, the colonizer should be neat in dress and clean, and the colonized person should be in terms of undressed and dirty. So, the next binary opposition is master versus slave. As you can see on page 14, the colonizer here should be a master in this post, and the colonized person or the African person should be the slave. But Makola is an African person, but he acts as a master to 10 black men that is working on the post. So this shows that the colonizer itself cannot even speak to the workers in the post. So the next binary opposition is clean versus dirty. As you can see on page 12, the colonized person, the colonizer, the Western person, see the colonized person as a dirty people. So they even call the colonized person as the filthy scoundrel. Belonging to a tribe from a very distant part of the land of darkness and sorrow, they did not run away, naturally supposing that as wandering strangers, they would be killed by the inhabitants of the country in which they were right. So here we can see the quotes, land of darkness and sorrow. They are portraying the land as the land is dark and sorrow. And the next example is on page 13. The quote is, receded into distances made indistinct by the glare of unclouded sunshine. As we know, the word glare or the verb glare usually used by people, but here they use the word glare of unclouded sunshine. And the next example is the great silence of the surrounding wilderness. It is the same as the example before. They use the word silence of the surrounding, which means their surrounding is silence without any sounds.
The day had come, and a heavy mist had descended upon the land, the mist penetrating, enveloping, and silent, the morning mist of tropical lands, the mist that clings and kills, the mist white and deadly, immaculate and poisonous. Now, this scene shows that Kayet started not to thinking straight. He sees the opposite of the calm mist. The mist became dangerous for him. He felt suffocated by it, and he felt as if the mist slowly kills him from the inside. The truth is, he is confused of what to do now that Kalia is dead, and he is all alone. We know that the two of them cannot be alone for long. He felt guilty because he killed Kalia, a man without a gun. As for the second picture, the quote says, I can hardly believe it, said Kayet tearfully. We took care of them as if they had been harmed. Now, in this scene, we know that the two white men start to lose everything and realize the situation that they were in are worst. In this scene, they do what they wanted, which is the ivory, but instead, they lose their man. Okay, now, we know that the workers at the train station refused to work for the white man. So, every day, they didn't do their work. So, Makola suggests a solution, and that is by creating a party for the workers so that they feel the urge to work. And then Macaulay managed to change the situation by exchanging the workers to be free from the station work in exchange for the ivory. Now this scene was done behind the two white men. Next morning, the two white men found out that they had no workers at all, but instead they get the ivory. And as we all know, that is when the scene started. They had nothing left to do. This shows their untidiness and unconstructed life. Their domestic life reflect on how they do their work as the men in charge of the trading station, even though they came to the outpost of progress as a civilized man. The way they lived and ruled their workers and job are not civilized at all. Let the slaves do their jobs for them. For example, Makola, the third staff in the charge of the trading system and arrange the workers. He is more organized and in life and also in doing his job. And also the job of the
Conclusion, we can see that the whole story was dominated by the Westerners, which are Kayets and Kaya. From the very beginning, it becomes clear that the title Outpost of Progress is ironic, for the two white men are lazy and incompetent. However, although the story presents two white European men that are in charge of the outpost, it reverses the positions of power by giving Makola, a civilized African, the tools to manipulate Kayets and Kalia.
Hello everyone. So let us move on to our next short story, which is School Picnic by Epi Gaskell. Before we elaborate more about the story, I would like to share with you guys the summary of the school picnic. School picnic is an indictment of the mean-spirited substitute school teacher, Miss Brown, who is asked to attend a Saturday picnic at a backwater Maori school. She resents that she has to attend the function. She dislikes the children and their elders, their customs, and their poverty. Miss Brown is a snob, with a little reason to be so, but the story is written to contrast the generosity of spirits of the Maori with the self-containment and false assurance that Miss Brown feels about her values and worth. By the end of the tale, Miss Brown ironically labels the Maoris as bloody savage, when in truth her rude and thoughtless behavior is manifestly insulting to her gracious and forgiving host.
In this short story, School Picnic, racial attitudes against the Maori are evident throughout the text. I'll show you why I said so. The first example of othering of the Maori was when Miss Brown was describing Terry. She described him as someone who was very fat. You can see here how she exaggerated her points. It was also pointed that the Maori has yellow teeth in order to show off how unhygienic he is. The description was exaggerated in order to show that Miss Brown despised being there with the untidy Maori. However, it's an entirely different thing when she was describing her fellow colonizer George. She depicted him as a handsome man with dark wavy hair, white teeth, beautifully muscled, as you can see here. Can you see how unfair she is? Terry was described as someone who is unhygienic, but for George, she sees him as someone who groomed himself to perfection. The description was purely biased. The Maori was given all the bad descriptions but the colonizer was somehow looked up to as something exquisite and divine. She herself take a good care of her look. And this is her based on this particular quotation. Beautiful, isn't she? With her old bicycle. In this short story, she is depicted as the typical British woman who groom themselves, opposed to the Maori woman who is always looked at negatively. For instance, she described terrorist's wife as a big fat wahine, which is woman. This is to show the superiority that the colonizer has over the colonized. Then, this is one more quotation that we should be focusing on based on this text. This picture clearly speaks to the quote. The Maori babies are described in parts and using rather peculiar adjectives for human. Small brown head lolly is to portray how helpless the babies are, and she seems to be dehumanizing the babies by describing them without a hint of affection. She even said that if she were to choose between populate and perish, she'll choose perish for the Maori babies. Harsh, right? But that's how the Maori are seen in this short story. Then, the place where the Maori is staying is described as hole, as we know, is on the ground, dark and dirty. It is cut off from the sunshine. This is like a metaphor to show that the Maori is cut off from civilization. Definitely not a place for someone who is as civilized as Miss Brown to stay.
As a conclusion, Epic Gaskell has written one of the best stories to do with Maoris. The writer sees things through the mind of Pakeha's schoolteacher, Miss Brown, who feels that she is more civilized than the Maoris and considered everything that Maori did was improper behavior.
Alright, so based on what my friends have explained earlier, I hope you guys understood about the historical background of colonialism. So colonialism is actually a control over governing influence of a nation over a dependent country, territory, or people. So the short story that we presented related to the colonialism includes summary, socio-historical background, quotation and pictures for both Outpost of Progress and School Picnic. That's all from us. Thank you.